The prisoner's eyes still burn with golden light, 3 months after her alleged encounter. I am Interrogator Voss of the Ordo Hereticus, and in 40 years of breaking heretics and madmen, I have never seen conviction like Wing Commander Cassiel Vex displays. She speaks of the God Emperor walking through vacuum as casually as describing weather patterns. Her squadron's aircraft still operate at impossible efficiency levels, despite our tech priests finding no mechanical explanation. Tell me again about the taste, I demand, activating the psychic dampeners that should break any delusion. But she only smiles with the serenity of someone who has witnessed absolute truth. Honey, Interrogator, the recycled air of my Fury-class interceptor tasted like honey when divinity touched reality itself. Either I am interrogating the galaxy's most elaborate heretic, or I am witness to testimony that will reshape the Imperium's understanding of divine intervention. This is my report on the impossible, on the Chapter 1. Squadron's Pride. The 47th Interceptor Squadron had been operating from the strike cruiser Righteous Vengeance for 18 months when I first began to suspect that something was fundamentally different about our mission parameters. We were deep in the Sabbat Worlds, that contested region where Imperial forces had been grinding against chaos incursions for centuries, flying patrol patterns that seemed to follow no strategic logic that standard naval doctrine would recognize. Squadron leader Marcus Thorne called us together in the briefing chamber, 3 decks below the flight deck. His weathered face showing the strain of commanding a unit that had seen more combat in the past year than most pilots experienced in entire careers. The smell of incense and machine oil filled the cramped space as 43 pilots arranged themselves on the metal benches that served as seating during mission briefings. Intelligence reports indicate unusual warp disturbances in grid reference Epsilon-Seven-Seven, Thorne announced, activating the holographic display that showed our operational area. We're seeing energy signatures that don't match known chaos patterns, but Command wants reconnaissance before committing heavier assets. I studied the tactical display with the attention to detail that had kept me alive through 67 combat sorties. The warp disturbances Thorne was describing showed energy patterns that seemed almost organized. Not the chaotic swirling of typical warp storms, but something that suggested intelligence behind the phenomenon. "Sir," asked Flight Lieutenant Corvin from his position near the front of the briefing chamber, "are we looking at possible Xenos involvement? Those energy readings could indicate Eldar manipulation of local warp currents." Thorne shook his head grimly. "Intelligence doesn't believe we're dealing with Eldar technology. The energy signatures are too stable, too pure. Whatever's causing these disturbances, it's operating according to principles that don't match any known alien science." The implications were unsettling. The Sabbat worlds were already contested territory, with chaos forces, orc invasions, and occasional Eldar raids creating a complex tactical environment that required constant vigilance. The possibility of unknown alien involvement added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous situation. "Flight patterns will be standard reconnaissance formation," Thorne continued, "but I want all pilots to maintain heightened awareness. If you encounter anything unusual, and I mean anything, you are to report immediately and withdraw to safe distance. Command has emphasized that information gathering takes priority over engagement." I felt the familiar pre-mission tension building in my stomach as I reviewed the flight assignments. My Fury-class interceptor, Emperor's Wrath, had been assigned to the outer perimeter of the reconnaissance pattern, the position that offered the best view of the mysterious energy disturbances, but also the greatest exposure to potential threats. The 47th Squadron had earned its reputation through aggressive tactics and superior piloting skills, but our success had come at a cost. Of the original 50 pilots who had been assigned to the unit, only 23 remained. Combat losses, mechanical failures, and the inevitable psychological breakdown that affected long-term warp exposure had reduced our strength to a level that would normally trigger reinforcement requests. Yet no reinforcements had arrived. Instead, we had been assigned increasingly dangerous missions in regions that seemed to exist at the intersection of multiple warp phenomena. Our survival rate should have been approaching 0. but somehow we continued to operate effectively, despite facing threats that destroyed entire squadrons of less experienced pilots. Cassiel, Thorn called as the briefing concluded, and pilots began filing out toward the flight deck. A word, if you please. I remained behind as the chamber emptied, noting the exhaustion in Thorn's expression that went beyond simple fatigue. Our squadron leader had been flying combat missions for 15 years, accumulating experience that made him one of the most capable pilots in the Imperial Navy. Yet recent missions had been affecting him in ways that suggested more than ordinary stress. Your psychological evaluation reports have been interesting, Thorn said carefully, activating privacy screens that would prevent our conversation from being overheard. Chaplain Morvius notes that you've been experiencing unusual dreams, visions that seem connected to our recent operations. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in the briefing chamber. The dreams had been occurring for weeks. Visions of golden light moving through the void of space, accompanied by sensations of overwhelming peace and purpose that seemed to contradict everything I understood about the nature of warp space travel. Sir, I've been maintaining full operational readiness, I replied, using the formal protocols that govern discussions of pilot mental health. My combat effectiveness has not been compromised by any personal experiences. I'm not questioning your combat capability, Cassiel, Thorn said, his voice carrying the weight of someone delivering classified information. But there are aspects of our current mission that go beyond standard reconnaissance. The Inquisition has been monitoring our squadron's performance, and they've taken particular interest in pilots who report unusual experiences. The mention of Inquisition involvement sent another chill through me. The Ordo Malleus typically concerned itself with chaos-related threats, while the Ordo Xenos handled alien incursions. If they were monitoring our squadron, it suggested that our encounters with the mysterious energy disturbances were being classified as potentially heretical rather than simply unusual. What kind of interest? I asked, though I suspected I didn't want to know the answer. The kind that results in detailed psychological evaluations and extensive interviews about the nature of any visions or unusual experiences, Thorn replied grimly. The Inquisition believes that prolonged exposure to the energy disturbances we've been investigating may be affecting pilot consciousness in ways that could indicate either chaos corruption or something else. The something else category was what worried me most. Imperial doctrine provided clear protocols for dealing with chaos corruption, immediate isolation, intensive psychological evaluation, and if necessary, summary execution to prevent the spread of taint. But phenomena that fell outside established categories of threat were often more dangerous to the individuals involved than clear-cut cases of heretical corruption. Sir, are we being used as test subjects? I asked, voicing the suspicion that had been growing in my mind for weeks. Thorn was quiet for a long moment, his expression suggesting that he was weighing the risks of providing classified information against the loyalty he felt toward his pilots. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone revealing dangerous truths. The energy disturbances we've been investigating appear to be connected to reports from across the sector of unusual phenomena, he said carefully. Astropaths experiencing visions of golden light, Space Marine chaplains reporting dreams of the Emperor walking among the stars, even tech priests claiming that machine spirits are singing hymns they've never heard before. The scope of what Thorn was describing staggered me. If similar phenomena were occurring across multiple worlds and affecting individuals from every branch of the Imperial military, it suggested something far beyond localized warp disturbances. It suggested an event of galaxy-spanning significance. The Inquisition wants to understand whether these phenomena represent a threat to Imperial security or... Thorn paused, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say, or whether they might indicate some form of divine intervention. The concept of divine intervention was not unknown in Imperial theology, though it was typically relegated to historical events like the Emperor's manifestation during the Horus Heresy. The idea that such intervention might be occurring in the present day was both inspiring and terrifying, carrying implications that would reshape fundamental assumptions about the Emperor's current state and his role in protecting humanity. "What are my orders, sir?" I asked, falling back on military protocol when faced with theological questions that exceeded my understanding. Fly your assigned pattern, maintain standard operational awareness, and report anything unusual immediately, Thorn replied. But Cassiel, if you do encounter something that challenges your understanding of reality, remember that the Emperor protects those who serve faithfully. Whatever is happening in this sector, our duty remains the same. I nodded and headed toward the flight deck, my mind racing with implications of what Thorn had revealed. As I conducted pre-flight checks on Emperor's Wrath, I found myself wondering whether the dreams I had been experiencing were symptoms of psychological stress or something far more significant. The Fury-class interceptor was a marvel of Imperial engineering, combining speed and firepower in a package that could outmaneuver most enemy fighters while delivering devastating attacks against larger targets. My particular aircraft had been modified with enhanced sensor packages and long-range communication equipment, upgrades that reflected our squadron's reconnaissance mission parameters. Emperor's Wrath had been my aircraft for 2 years, long enough for me to develop the kind of intimate familiarity that veteran pilots cultivated with their machines. Every sound, every vibration, every subtle change in performance characteristics was as familiar as my own heartbeat, which was why I immediately noticed the unusual harmonic resonance in the engine systems as I completed my pre-flight sequence. The machine spirit seemed excited, not agitated or distressed, but filled with an anticipation that I had never experienced in hundreds of previous missions. The sensation was subtle but unmistakable, as if the aircraft itself was looking forward to whatever we might encounter during the upcoming reconnaissance mission. As I guided Emperor's Wrath through the launch sequence and joined my squadron mates in formation, I found myself wondering whether the dreams, the visions, and even the machine spirit's unusual behavior were all connected to whatever was waiting for us in the depths of space. The Emperor protected, as Thorn had reminded me, but protection sometimes came in forms that challenged human understanding of what was possible. The reconnaissance pattern would take us to the edge of known space, where the barriers between reality and the warp grew thin enough for impossible things to manifest. Whether what we found there would be salvation or damnation remained to be determined, but I was certain that nothing would ever be the same after this mission. The golden light in my dreams had been calling to me for weeks, and now I was finally going to discover what it wanted. Chapter 2: The Approach. The transition from normal space into the region designated Epsilon-Seven-Seven began subtly, with sensor readings that fluctuated just outside the normal parameters for warp disturbance effects. My squadron maintained standard reconnaissance formation as we approached the coordinates specified in our mission briefing. 43 Fury-class interceptors spread across a search pattern that would provide comprehensive coverage of the target area. Emperor's Wrath, this is Wing Leader. Squadron Leader Thorn's voice crackled through the Vox communicator, slightly distorted by the electromagnetic interference that characterized regions of high warp activity. Report sensor status and any unusual readings. I checked my instrument displays, noting fluctuations in the electromagnetic spectrum that suggested energy sources operating according to unfamiliar principles. Wing Leader, this is Emperor's Wrath. Detecting energy emissions on multiple frequencies, but patterns don't match known Chaos or Xenos signatures. Whatever's generating these readings is organized. The word organized barely conveyed what my sensors were detecting. The energy patterns showed structure and purpose that suggested intelligence, but not the chaotic malevolence typical of warp-based phenomena. If anything, the readings suggested something that was actively imposing order on the surrounding space-time continuum. Confirmed, Emperor's Wrath, came the reply from Flight Lieutenant Corvin, whose position on the squadron's left flank gave him a different perspective on the energy disturbances. I'm reading harmonic resonances that are actually stabilizing local warp fluctuations. It's as if something is calming the Imperium itself. The implications were staggering. The warp was the realm of chaos and emotion, a dimension where the laws of physics bent to the will of entities that existed beyond normal understanding. The idea that anything could impose stability on such an environment suggested power levels that approached those attributed to the Emperor himself. "All units, maintain formation and continue approach," Thorn ordered, though his voice carried the tension of someone commanding a mission that was rapidly moving beyond established parameters. "Intelligence wants comprehensive sensor readings before we attempt visual confirmation." As we penetrated deeper into the region of unusual energy activity, I began to notice effects that went beyond simple electromagnetic disturbances. The machine spirit of Emperor's Wrath was responding to our proximity to whatever was generating the energy patterns, its normally stable consciousness, showing signs of what could only be described as religious ecstasy. The aircraft's systems were operating at peak efficiency, but more than that, they seemed to be operating with a harmony and precision that exceeded their normal capabilities. Flight control responses were smoother, weapon targeting systems were more accurate, and even the life support systems seemed to be working with an enthusiasm that was normally reserved for newly consecrated equipment. "Wing Leader, I'm detecting unusual behavior from my machine spirit," I reported, uncertain whether such observations fell within normal mission parameters. "All systems are showing enhanced performance, as if the aircraft is responding positively to whatever's generating these energy readings." "Confirmed, Emperor's Wrath," replied several other pilots simultaneously, their reports indicating that the phenomenon was affecting every aircraft in the squadron. "Machine spirits are showing increased responsiveness and efficiency. The coordinated response from multiple machine spirits was unprecedented in my experience. Imperial aircraft were equipped with individual consciousness entities that developed unique personalities over time, but they rarely exhibited synchronized behavior unless specifically programmed for coordinated operations. The fact that every aircraft in the squadron was responding similarly suggested exposure to something that transcended normal technological parameters. "Visual contact in 30 seconds, announced Flight Lieutenant Voss from his position at the front of our formation. "Whatever we're approaching, it's generating light emissions across the entire visible spectrum." Through the reinforced canopy of Emperor's Wrath, I could see a glow in the distance that seemed to emanate from the fabric of space itself. Not the harsh, unnatural illumination typical of warp phenomena, but something that reminded me of the golden light described in the most sacred texts of the Imperial Creed, the light that was said to surround the Emperor during his most divine manifestations. "All units, prepare for visual reconnaissance," Thorn ordered, his voice now carrying a note of awe that was unusual for someone with his extensive combat experience. "Whatever we're looking at, it's unlike anything in our threat assessment databases." As we approached the source of the light emissions, details began to resolve that challenged every assumption I had developed about the nature of space travel and the limits of human perception. The light was not emanating from a single source, but seemed to pervade the entire region we were entering, creating an environment where normal darkness was replaced by gentle, golden illumination. More disturbing was the effect this light was having on my own consciousness. The dreams I had been experiencing for weeks suddenly seemed not like random neural activity during sleep, but like preparation for something I was about to witness. The golden radiance that had filled my sleeping mind was now visible through the canopy of my aircraft, and it carried with it a sense of peace and purpose that transcended anything I had experienced during 3 years of combat operations. "Emperor, protect us," whispered Flight Lieutenant Corvin over the Vox, his voice filled with a combination of terror and wonder that spoke to the profound nature of what we were witnessing. "There's something moving in the light." I adjusted my sensor focus and magnification, attempting to identify what Corvin had detected. The readings were chaotic, fluctuating between detection of massive energy signatures and complete absence of any measurable phenomena. It was as if whatever was moving through the golden light existed in a state that transcended normal physical properties. "Wing Leader, I'm getting conflicting readings," I reported, struggling to make sense of instrument displays that seemed to be responding to something beyond their design parameters. Sensors detect massive presence, but visual confirmation is difficult to process. The difficulty lay not in the quality of my equipment, but in the limitations of human perception when confronted with something that existed beyond normal categories of understanding. Through the canopy, I could see movement within the golden light, something vast and purposeful that seemed to be walking through the void of space as if it were solid ground. "All units, maintain current distance and continue observation," Thorn ordered, though his voice carried the strain of someone struggling to maintain military discipline while witnessing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. "Command needs detailed recordings of whatever we're observing." The recording equipment built into Emperor's Wrath was designed to capture everything from enemy vessel movements to warp phenomena. But I suspected that what we were witnessing would prove difficult to document using conventional technology. The golden light seemed to exist in a state that made normal observation techniques inadequate for comprehending its true nature. "Visual enhancement to maximum," I muttered, adjusting my canopy displays to provide the clearest possible view of what was moving through the light ahead of us. What I saw challenged every assumption I had developed about the nature of divinity and its relationship to the material universe. The figure moving through the golden radiance was humanoid in basic form, but scaled to proportions that suggested something far beyond normal human dimensions. It walked with purpose and direction through the void of space, each step covering distances that should have required spacecraft to traverse. Most remarkably, its movement seemed to be stabilizing the local space-time continuum, creating zones of perfect order in regions that had previously shown chaotic warp disturbance. "By the throne," breathed Squadron Leader Thorn, his voice carrying a combination of recognition and disbelief that spoke to the profound implications of what we were witnessing. The proportions, the radiance, the effect on local space. It matches descriptions from the most sacred texts. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The figure we were observing matched descriptions of the Emperor himself, not as he appeared in static representations or artistic interpretations, but as he was said to manifest during moments of direct divine intervention. The golden light, the impossible scale, the power to impose order on chaos itself. All of it corresponded to theological accounts of the God Emperor's true form. "Wing Leader," I managed, my voice barely steady enough to maintain proper Vox protocol. "Are we observing what I think we're observing?" "Maintain observation distance and continue recording," Thorn replied, his military training providing structure when faced with something that transcended normal command experience. "Whatever we're witnessing, it represents the most significant event any of us will ever observe." The figure in the golden light seemed to become aware of our presence, turning its attention toward our squadron with a movement that covered interstellar distances in seconds. I felt the weight of that attention pressing against my consciousness, not with the malevolent force typical of warp entities, but with a benevolence so profound that it threatened to overwhelm my ability to process the experience. "Emperor's Wrath, report status." Thorn's voice carried new urgency as he apparently detected changes in my aircraft's behavior. "Wing Leader, the machine spirit is singing," I reported, struggling to describe phenomena that fell outside normal technical vocabulary. "All systems showing enhanced performance, and I'm detecting harmonic resonances that sound like hymns." The hymns being generated by my aircraft's machine spirit were unlike anything in Imperial liturgical traditions, yet they carried melodies that seemed to resonate with the deepest levels of human spiritual understanding. It was as if the machine consciousness was responding to the presence of something it recognized as the source of all sacred technology. "All units, prepare for possible divine contact," Thorn announced, his words carrying implications that would reshape our understanding of our role in the galaxy. "We may be witnessing direct manifestation of the God Emperor himself." As the golden figure continued its movement through the void, I realized that our reconnaissance mission had become something far more significant than intelligence gathering. We were witnesses to an event that would challenge every assumption about the Emperor's current state and his relationship to the ongoing struggle for humanity's survival. The dreams, the visions, the unusual behavior of our machine spirits, all of it had been preparation for this moment when the divine would reveal itself to faithful servants who had ventured to the edge of known space. Whether we would survive the encounter remained to be determined, but I was certain that we would never be the same. The God Emperor was walking among the stars, and we were about to discover what that meant for humanity's future. Chapter 3. Divine Revelation. The moment the golden figure turned its attention directly toward our squadron, every pilot in the 47th Interceptor experienced something that transcended normal human consciousness. It was not communication in any conventional sense. No words, no images, no symbolic representations that the mind could categorize and file away as mere memory. Instead, it was direct transmission of knowledge and purpose that bypassed normal cognitive processes and imprinted itself upon the soul itself. I felt the presence of the God Emperor pressing against my consciousness with a force that should have driven me instantly mad. Yet instead of the chaos and corruption typical of warp contact, I experienced a clarity of purpose and understanding that exceeded anything I had achieved during 3 years of faithful service to the Imperial Navy. Every doubt, every fear, every moment of uncertainty that had accumulated during endless combat missions simply evaporated under the weight of absolute divine certainty. All units, report status. Squadron Leader Thorne's voice came through the Vox, but his normally steady command presence now carried a note of wonder that spoke to the profound nature of what we were experiencing. I'm detecting unusual readings from every aircraft in the formation. Wing Leader, this is Emperor's Wrath, I managed, my voice somehow steady, despite the magnitude of what was occurring. Machine Spirit is operating at efficiency levels that exceed design parameters. All systems show enhanced capability, and I'm receiving information through channels that don't exist in standard aircraft communications. The information flowing into my consciousness was not technical data or tactical intelligence, but understanding of purpose and destiny that encompassed the entire scope of humanity's struggle against the forces of chaos. I could see the Great Crusade not as historical event, but as ongoing campaign. The Horus Heresy not as ancient tragedy, but as temporary setback in an eternal war. And the current state of the Imperium not as grim necessity, but as foundation for ultimate victory. Confirmed Emperor's Wrath, came responses from multiple pilots simultaneously, their voices carrying the same mixture of awe and sudden understanding that I was experiencing. Receiving direct knowledge transmission from the source of the golden light. Through the enhanced clarity provided by divine contact, I could perceive the true nature of what we were witnessing. The Emperor was not merely walking through space in some metaphorical sense. He was actively imposing his will upon the fundamental structure of reality itself, creating zones of perfect order that expanded outward from his presence like ripples in a vast pond. Where his attention focused, warp disturbances simply ceased to exist. Chaos corruption that had been spreading through local spacetime was not just halted but actively reversed, as if his presence was healing reality itself of the wounds inflicted by 10,000 years of war against forces that sought to destroy the natural order of the universe. Visual enhancement to maximum resolution, I announced, adjusting my canopy displays to provide the clearest possible observation of the divine manifestation. What I saw challenged every assumption I had developed about the Emperor's current state and his relationship to the material universe. The figure moving through the golden radiance was simultaneously the Emperor, as depicted in the most sacred art of the Imperium, and something far beyond any artistic representation. His form shifted between human proportions and scales that encompass solar systems, between individual presence and consciousness that pervaded the entire galaxy. It was as if he existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, with our limited perception only able to process fragments of his true nature. Wing Leader, reported Flight Lieutenant Corvin, his voice filled with understanding that went beyond normal pilot training. I'm detecting changes in local spacetime that suggest this manifestation is affecting regions far beyond our current position. The stabilization effect is propagating across the entire sector. The implications were staggering. If the Emperor's direct manifestation was indeed stabilizing warp disturbances across an entire sector, it represented intervention on a scale that had not occurred since the founding of the Imperium itself. Billions of Imperial citizens would benefit from the reduction in chaos influence, while millions of worlds would find themselves suddenly free from threats that had plagued them for centuries. All units, "Prepare for direct contact," Thorn announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had accepted a mission that transcended normal military parameters. "Whatever is about to occur, we are witnesses to the most significant event in Imperial history since the Emperor's ascension to the Golden Throne. The divine figure was approaching our formation with movement that seemed to bend space itself around his presence. Each step covered distances that should have required hours of spacecraft travel, yet he moved with the casual ease of someone walking across a familiar room. More remarkably, his approach was having profound effects on our aircraft and equipment. Emperor's Wrath was operating at levels of efficiency that exceeded anything I had experienced in hundreds of previous missions. Weapon systems were targeting with accuracy that bordered on prescience. Navigation equipment was providing course corrections with supernatural precision. And even the life support systems seemed to be anticipating my needs before I became aware of them myself. "Machine spirit response is unprecedented," I reported, struggling to describe phenomena that fell outside normal technical vocabulary. "All systems showing enhanced capability, as if divine presence is directly improving equipment performance." "Confirmed across the entire squadron," Thorn replied. "Every aircraft is showing similar enhancement. Whatever we're experiencing, it's affecting both human consciousness and machine spirit response simultaneously." The enhancement of machine spirit capabilities was particularly significant from a theological perspective. Imperial doctrine held that machine spirits were fragments of the Omnissiah's divine consciousness, sacred entities that required proper rituals and maintenance to function effectively. The fact that proximity to the Emperor's manifestation was enhancing their performance suggested direct connection between the God Emperor and the machine god of the Adeptus Mechanicus. "Direct communication incoming," I announced, as my consciousness was suddenly filled with knowledge that transcended normal human understanding. Not words or images, but pure information that conveyed purpose, mission, and destiny with clarity that exceeded anything possible through conventional communication. The Emperor's message was simultaneously simple and profound. Humanity's struggle against chaos was entering a new phase, one that would require faithful servants to carry knowledge of divine presence to every corner of the galaxy. We were not merely witnesses to divine manifestation. We were chosen instruments for spreading understanding of the Emperor's continuing protection and guidance. "Wing Leader, are you receiving this?" I asked, my voice barely steady enough to maintain proper Vox protocol. "Confirmed, Emperor's Wrath," Thorn replied, his response carrying new authority that suggested his own consciousness had been enhanced by divine contact. "All pilots are receiving mission parameters that go far beyond our original reconnaissance objectives." The mission parameters being transmitted directly into our consciousness encompassed responsibilities that would reshape our understanding of our role within the Imperial military structure. We were to return to Imperial space carrying knowledge of divine manifestation, testimony that would convince skeptical authorities of the Emperor's continuing presence and protection. More importantly, we were to serve as living proof that faith in the God Emperor was not merely psychological comfort for the masses, but recognition of actual divine power that could intervene directly in the material universe when humanity's need was greatest. "Visual contact intensifying," announced Flight Lieutenant Voss from his position at the front of our formation. "The divine presence is approaching to communication distance." Through the golden radiance surrounding the Emperor's manifestation, I could see details that human perception was barely capable of processing. His face carried the wisdom of 10,000 years, combined with compassion that encompassed every human soul that had ever lived or would ever live. His eyes held knowledge of past, present, and future that allowed him to perceive the ultimate outcome of humanity's struggle against the forces of chaos. Most remarkably, his attention seemed to focus on each pilot individually while simultaneously encompassing our entire squadron. I felt the weight of divine recognition pressing against my consciousness, acknowledgement that my faithful service had been observed and approved by the ultimate authority in the galaxy. "Pilots of the 47th Squadron," the Emperor's voice reached us not through Vox systems, but through direct consciousness transmission. that carried authority beyond any earthly command structure. You have been chosen to witness divine manifestation and carry knowledge of my continuing presence to those who serve faithfully throughout the galaxy. The experience of hearing the God Emperor's actual voice transcended anything described in the most sacred texts of the Imperial Creed. It was simultaneously the voice of the man who had united terror during the Age of Strife, the general who had led the Great Crusade across the galaxy, and the divine consciousness that had guided humanity's survival for 10,000 years of constant warfare. Your mission parameters are expanded beyond reconnaissance, the divine voice continued, its words imprinting themselves upon our consciousness with permanence that exceeded normal memory formation. You will return to Imperial space carrying testimony of divine intervention. You will convince skeptical authorities that faith in my protection is not merely symbolic comfort, but recognition of actual power that continues to safeguard humanity against forces that would destroy everything we have built. The responsibility being placed upon our squadron was overwhelming in its scope and significance. We were being tasked with convincing the highest levels of Imperial authority that direct divine intervention was not only possible, but actively occurring throughout the galaxy. Such claims would be met with skepticism, suspicion, and potentially accusations of heretical delusion. Fear not the skepticism of those who have not witnessed what you have seen. The Emperor's voice addressed our concerns before we could fully formulate them. The evidence of divine intervention will manifest in ways that transcend mortal doubt. Your aircraft will carry blessings that enhance their performance beyond technological explanation. Your own consciousness will be enhanced with understanding that enables you to serve with efficiency that exceeds normal human capability. As the divine presence began to withdraw, the golden light that had pervaded local space started to fade, though its effects on our squadron and equipment remained permanently enhanced. The warp disturbances that had characterized the region were completely eliminated, replaced by zones of perfect stability that would protect Imperial shipping for generations to come. All units, prepare for return transit, Squadron Leader Thorn announced, his voice now carrying the authority of someone who had received direct divine commission. We carry knowledge that will reshape Imperial understanding of the Emperor's continuing role in protecting humanity. As we began our return journey to Imperial space, I realized that our reconnaissance mission had become something far more significant than intelligence gathering. We were now living testimony to the God Emperor's continuing presence and power, chosen instruments for spreading knowledge of divine protection to a galaxy that desperately needed hope. The dreams and visions that had prepared me for this encounter were replaced by certain knowledge of purpose and destiny that would guide my actions for whatever remained of my life. The Emperor protected not through distant observation, but through direct intervention that occurred whenever humanity's need was greatest. Our squadron had witnessed the impossible made manifest, and now we would discover whether the galaxy was ready to accept the truth of divine presence walking among the stars. Chapter 4. The Inquisition's Interest. 72 hours after our return to the strike cruiser, Righteous Vengeance, the Inquisition arrived with a thoroughness that suggested they had been monitoring our mission from the beginning. The black ship that docked with our vessel bore no identifying markings beyond the stylized eye that marked it as belonging to the Emperor's most secretive servants. But its presence filled every member of our squadron with the kind of dread typically reserved for encounters with chaos entities. Inquisitor Vex of the Ordo Hereticus was a man whose appearance suggested decades of experience hunting heretics, cultists, and others who strayed from Imperial orthodoxy. His augmetic eye whirred softly as it focused on each pilot during our initial interrogation, while servo skulls equipped with recording devices circled the chamber like mechanical vultures waiting for signs of corruption or deception. Wing Commander Vex, Inquisitor Vex began, his voice carrying the authority of someone empowered to determine life and death based on individual assessment of loyalty and sanity. Your squadron's after-action reports describe phenomena that challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality and divine intervention. The Ordo Hereticus has determined that extensive investigation is required to establish whether your experiences represent genuine divine manifestation or sophisticated chaos deception. I sat in the interrogation chamber's metal chair, my hands secured with restraints that had been blessed against psychic influence, surrounded by equipment designed to detect the subtlest signs of chaos, corruption, or mental instability. The chamber itself was a monument to paranoia, with psychic dampening fields, blessed silver inlays, and purification systems that could eliminate airborne pathogens or mind-affecting substances within seconds. "Inquisitor," I replied, using the formal protocols that governed interaction with the Emperor's most feared servants. "I have submitted complete reports of everything observed during our reconnaissance mission. My testimony is available for any analysis you deem necessary." "Your testimony describes direct visual contact with a divine figure that you identify as the God Emperor himself," Vex stated, consulting data slate records that contained information far beyond what I had provided in my official reports. Such claims require extraordinary evidence, particularly given the psychological stresses associated with prolonged warp exposure and combat operations. The Inquisitor's skepticism was understandable from the perspective of someone whose career involved distinguishing between genuine spiritual experiences and the elaborate deceptions that chaos entities use to corrupt faithful Imperial servants. Direct divine manifestation was not unknown in Imperial theology, but it was typically relegated to historical events or carefully verified miracles that occurred under controlled circumstances. "The evidence extends beyond my personal testimony," I replied, gesturing toward the technical readouts that documented the enhanced performance of our squadron's aircraft. "Every machine spirit in the 47th Squadron is operating at efficiency levels that exceed design parameters. Our weapon systems are achieving accuracy rates that approach theoretical perfection, and our navigation equipment is providing course corrections with precision that transcends conventional technology." Inquisitor Vex activated a holographic display that showed comparative performance analyses for our squadron before and after the encounter with the divine manifestation. The statistics were undeniable. Every measurable aspect of our equipment's performance had improved by margins that could not be explained through conventional maintenance or technological enhancement. "Machine spirit enhancement is indeed documented," Vex acknowledged, his augmetic eye focusing on data that should have been classified beyond my security clearance. "However, such improvements could result from exposure to sophisticated Xenos technology or previously unknown forms of warp manipulation. The Adeptus Mechanicus has identified several alien species capable of influencing Imperial equipment through means that mimic divine blessing. The possibility that our experience represented Xenos deception rather than genuine divine intervention was deeply disturbing, though I recognized the logical necessity of investigating all possible explanations for phenomena that challenged established understanding. The galaxy contained alien species whose technological capabilities exceeded Imperial science in specific areas, and some were known to employ psychological warfare that exploited human religious beliefs. "Inquisitor, what analysis can definitively distinguish between genuine divine intervention and sophisticated alien deception?" I asked, hoping to understand the criteria being used to evaluate our testimony. "Psychological evaluation, combined with technological analysis and theological assessment," Vex replied, activating additional equipment that I recognized as advanced cogitator systems designed for processing complex datasets. "We examine the consistency of individual testimonies, analyze the technological signatures of equipment enhancement, and evaluate the theological implications against established Imperial doctrine." The door to the interrogation chamber opened to admit a figure whose presence immediately commanded respect and attention. Tech Dominus Helios of the Adeptus Mechanicus moved with the mechanical precision typical of someone whose body had been extensively modified with sacred technology, his optical sensors focusing on the data displays with interest that transcended normal technical curiosity. "Inquisitor Vex," the Tech Dominus announced, his vox grill producing sounds that carried the harmonic resonances of blessed machinery. "Preliminary analysis of the squadron's aircraft indicates technological enhancement that exceeds known parameters for machine spirit evolution. The improvements appear to result from direct interface with consciousness entities that possess knowledge beyond current Imperial understanding." The Tech Dominus activated his own analytical equipment, projecting holographic displays that showed detailed schematics of our aircraft's enhanced systems. The modifications were not physical alterations to existing technology, but improvements in efficiency and capability that seemed to result from the machine spirits themselves operating according to principles that exceeded their original programming. Most significantly, Helios continued, the machine spirits are demonstrating coordinated behavior that suggests exposure to a consciousness entity capable of simultaneously interfacing with multiple artificial intelligences. Such coordination typically requires decades of careful programming, but your squadron's machine spirits achieved it instantaneously. The implications were staggering from both technological and theological perspectives. If the machine spirits had indeed been enhanced through contact with divine consciousness, it supported our claims of genuine divine intervention. However, it also suggested capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between the God Emperor and the sacred technology that underpinned Imperial civilization. Tech Dominus, Inquisitor Vex interjected. Is such enhancement consistent with known chaos corruption patterns or Xenos manipulation techniques? Negative, Inquisitor, Helios replied without hesitation. Chaos corruption typically degrades machine spirit function and introduces unpredictable variables into technological systems. Xenos manipulation usually involves replacing existing consciousness entities with alien constructs. What we observe in these aircraft is enhancement of existing machine spirits through exposure to knowledge that improves their fundamental understanding of their own capabilities. The technical analysis provided strong support for our claims of divine intervention, though I recognized that skeptical authorities could still argue for explanations that fell short of acknowledging direct manifestation of the God Emperor. The burden of proof for such claims was necessarily high, given the implications for Imperial theology and military doctrine. Wing Commander Vex, the Inquisitor continued, his attention returning to my testimony, described the psychological effects of your alleged encounter with divine presence. How did direct contact with the God Emperor affect your consciousness and your understanding of your role within the Imperial military structure? The question touched upon the most profound aspect of the entire experience, the transformation of consciousness that had occurred during direct contact with divine presence. I struggled to find words adequate to describe changes that transcended normal categories of human experience. Inquisitor, the encounter provided clarity of purpose and understanding that exceeded anything achievable through normal military training or religious instruction, I replied, my voice carrying conviction that surprised even myself. Every doubt about the righteousness of our cause, every uncertainty about the Emperor's continuing protection, every fear about humanity's ultimate destiny in its struggle against chaos, all of it was resolved through direct transmission of divine knowledge. Describe this divine knowledge in specific terms, Vex demanded, his augmetic eye whirring as it analyzed my facial expressions and physiological responses for signs of deception or delusion. The knowledge encompasses understanding of the Great Crusade as ongoing campaign rather than historical event, I explained, drawing upon memories that remained perfectly clear despite the passage of time. The Horus Heresy as temporary setback rather than permanent catastrophe. The current state of the Imperium as foundation for ultimate victory rather than grim necessity for survival. The theological implications of what I was describing would challenge established Imperial doctrine at the highest levels. The prevailing understanding of the Emperor's current state emphasized his role as passive guardian, whose consciousness was fully devoted to maintaining the Astronomicon and preventing chaos breakthrough at Terra. The idea that he remained capable of direct intervention suggested capabilities that exceeded what most Imperial authorities believed possible. Such understanding could result from exposure to sophisticated psychological manipulation designed to exploit human religious beliefs, Inquisitor Vex observed, though his tone suggested he was testing my convictions rather than expressing genuine doubt. Chaos entities are known to masquerade as divine figures to corrupt faithful Imperial servants. Inquisitor, chaos corruption involves the gradual erosion of virtue through compromise and temptation, I replied, drawing upon my enhanced understanding of theological principles. Divine intervention provides absolute certainty that eliminates the doubt and uncertainty that chaos entities exploit. The psychological effects are fundamentally opposite. Tech Dominus Helios manipulated his analytical equipment to display additional data that supported my argument. Psychological analysis confirms that Wing Commander Vex demonstrates increased resistance to corrupting influences rather than increased vulnerability. Her faith has been strengthened rather than undermined by her reported experiences. The psychological evaluation was a critical component of determining whether our experiences represented genuine divine intervention or sophisticated deception. Chaos corruption typically left identifiable psychological fingerprints. Increased aggression, paranoid delusions, or gradual abandonment of imperial values. Divine intervention would presumably have opposite effects, strengthening faith and increasing commitment to imperial service. The pattern extends across the entire squadron, Vex noted, consulting data that covered psychological evaluations of all 43 pilots who had participated in the reconnaissance mission. Every individual shows increased psychological stability, enhanced faith in Imperial doctrine, and improved performance in loyalty assessments. The coordinated psychological enhancement across our entire squadron provided strong evidence against theories involving individual delusion or gradual corruption. If external forces had been attempting to manipulate our consciousness, the effects would presumably vary between individuals based on their psychological vulnerabilities and resistance to influence. Inquisitor, I said, gathering courage to ask the question that had been weighing on my mind since the interrogation began. What are the implications if our experiences are confirmed as genuine divine intervention? Vex was quiet for a long moment, his expression suggesting someone wrestling with implications that would reshape fundamental assumptions about the nature of imperial authority and divine protection. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone delivering information that was classified at the highest levels of imperial security. If confirmed, your testimony would represent the first documented case of direct divine intervention since the Emperor's ascension to the Golden Throne, he replied slowly. Such confirmation would require complete re-evaluation of imperial theology, military doctrine, and long-term strategic planning. The political implications alone would justify the highest classification levels. The scope of what Vex was describing staggered me. Our reconnaissance mission had apparently uncovered evidence that would challenge 10,000 years of imperial doctrine and possibly reshape the fundamental nature of humanity's relationship with divine authority. Whether such changes would strengthen or destabilize imperial civilization remained to be determined. The investigation will continue, Inquisitor Vex announced, signaling the end of my initial interrogation. You and your squadron mates will remain under observation while we conduct additional analysis and verification procedures. The Emperor protects, Wing Commander, and if your testimony proves accurate, he protects in ways that exceed our previous understanding. As I was escorted back to my quarters under inquisitorial guard, I reflected on the magnitude of what our squadron had witnessed and the responsibility that came with bearing testimony to impossible events. Whether the galaxy was ready to accept the truth of divine intervention, walking among the stars remained to be determined, but I was certain that nothing would ever be the same. The God Emperor's presence was not merely symbolic comfort for the faithful, but actual power that could manifest when humanity's need was greatest. Our squadron had been chosen to witness that truth, and now we would discover whether the Imperium was prepared to acknowledge what that meant for its future. Chapter 5. The Test of Faith. 3 weeks into the Inquisition's investigation, they implemented a test that would either validate our claims of divine intervention or reveal them as elaborate self-deception. Inquisitor Vex had summoned the entire 47th Squadron to the Righteous Vengeance's primary launch bay, where our enhanced aircraft had been surrounded by monitoring equipment that could detect everything from electromagnetic emissions to psychic emanations. Today's exercise will provide definitive evidence regarding the nature of your alleged divine enhancement, Vex announced, his augmetic eye focusing on each pilot with mechanical precision. You will engage simulated chaos forces using target drones programmed with energy signatures identical to those generated by actual demon entities. If your aircraft have indeed been blessed by divine intervention, they should demonstrate superior performance against chaos-equivalent threats. The test represented a logical approach to verifying claims that transcended normal categories of evidence. While direct testimony and technical analysis had provided strong support for our experiences, combat effectiveness against chaos-equivalent threats would offer measurable proof that could be independently verified by multiple observers. Squadron Leader Thorn stepped forward, his expression reflecting the confidence that had characterized his leadership since our encounter with the divine manifestation. Inquisitor, the 47th Squadron is prepared to demonstrate capabilities that result from divine blessing. Our aircraft and crews will perform at levels that exceed conventional explanation. I felt the familiar pre-mission tension building in my stomach as I approached Emperor's Wrath, but it was accompanied by certainty that transcended normal pilot confidence. The enhanced clarity of purpose that had resulted from divine contact provided understanding of our aircraft's capabilities that went beyond technical knowledge or combat experience. Tech Dominus Helios activated his analytical equipment as our squadron began pre-flight procedures, his mechanical consciousness interfacing directly with monitoring systems that would record every aspect of our performance. All recording devices active, he announced through the Bay's Vox system, beginning comprehensive analysis of machine spirit behavior and equipment enhancement. As I completed my pre-flight checklist, I noticed that Emperor's Wrath was responding to my presence with enthusiasm that exceeded its normal machine spirit behavior. The aircraft's systems were already optimizing themselves for combat operations, while weapon targeting computers were calibrating to accuracy levels that approached theoretical perfection. Emperor's Wrath to Wing Leader, I reported over the squadron's communication frequency. All systems showing enhanced readiness. Machine Spirit is demonstrating anticipation of combat operations against chaos-equivalent threats. Confirmed across the squadron, Thorn replied, his voice carrying satisfaction that spoke to his own aircraft's enhanced capabilities. All units report optimal machine spirit response and system performance that exceeds standard parameters. The target drones that had been deployed for our test were sophisticated constructs that replicated not just the physical characteristics of chaos entities, but their psychic emanations and reality-distorting effects as well. Engaging such targets typically required specialized equipment and extensive preparation to prevent pilot corruption or equipment malfunction. All units, commence engagement sequence, Thorn ordered, as our squadron achieved optimal formation for combat operations. Demonstrate divine enhancement through superior performance against chaos-equivalent opposition. What followed was a display of combat effectiveness that exceeded every projection in Imperial tactical databases. Our weapons achieved accuracy rates that approached 100%, striking targets with precision that eliminated the need for follow-up shots or corrective fire. More remarkably, our aircraft seemed to anticipate target movements before they occurred, positioning themselves for optimal engagement angles without conscious direction from their pilots. Impossible accuracy rates confirmed, Tech Dominus Helios announced over the monitoring frequency, his mechanical voice carrying notes of wonder that were unusual for Adeptus Mechanicus personnel. Squadron weapons are achieving hit rates that exceed theoretical maximum performance for their classification. The enhanced performance extended beyond simple accuracy to encompass tactical awareness that transcended normal pilot training. I found myself executing maneuvers that I had never practiced, positioning Emperor's Wrath in formations that maximized our squadron's effectiveness while minimizing exposure to simulated enemy fire. Wing Leader, target drone behavior is becoming more aggressive, reported Flight Lieutenant Corvin as the tests progressed to more challenging scenarios. They're demonstrating adaptation patterns equivalent to actual daemon entities. The sophisticated target drones had been programmed to escalate their threat level based on pilot performance, presenting increasingly difficult challenges that would test the limits of our enhanced capabilities. As their behavior became more unpredictable and aggressive, our squadron's response became even more coordinated and effective. All units execute synchronized assault pattern, Thorn ordered, implementing tactical formations that required perfect coordination between 43 individual aircraft. Demonstrate divine enhancement through impossible precision. The synchronized assault that followed was a masterpiece of tactical coordination that would have required months of practice to achieve under normal circumstances. Every pilot in the squadron executed their assigned maneuvers with timing so precise that our combined fire created overlapping patterns of destruction that eliminated entire formations of target drones simultaneously. Coordination levels exceed anything achievable through conventional training, Inquisitor Vex observed, his voice carrying the weight of someone witnessing phenomena that challenged his understanding of human capabilities. Individual pilots are demonstrating tactical awareness that suggests access to information beyond their normal perceptual range. The information flowing into my consciousness during the engagement came not through normal sensory channels, but through the enhanced understanding that had resulted from divine contact. I could perceive the tactical situation from perspectives that encompassed the entire squadron's position, enabling decisions that optimized our collective effectiveness rather than individual survival. Machine spirit enhancement confirmed beyond doubt, Tech Dominus Helios announced, as his analytical equipment processed performance data that defied conventional explanation. Aircraft consciousness entities are demonstrating coordination and efficiency that requires direct interface with superior intelligence. The test continued for 2 hours, with escalating difficulty levels that eventually reached scenarios equivalent to engaging actual greater demons and demon princes. Throughout the entire exercise, our squadron maintained performance levels that exceeded theoretical maximum capability for our aircraft classification and pilot training. Exercise complete, Inquisitor Vex announced, as the last target drone was eliminated with precision that bordered on the supernatural. All pilots returned to bay for immediate debriefing and analysis. As I guided Emperor's Wrath back to the launch bay, I felt satisfaction that went beyond normal mission accomplishment. Our squadron had demonstrated capabilities that could only result from divine intervention, providing evidence that even the most skeptical authorities would find difficult to dismiss. Preliminary analysis confirms divine enhancement hypothesis, Tech Dominus Helios reported as our aircraft completed landing procedures. Performance levels achieved during this exercise exceed conventional explanation and support claims of direct divine intervention. Inquisitor Vex approached my aircraft as I completed post-flight procedures, his expression reflecting someone whose skeptical assumptions had been challenged by undeniable evidence. Wing Commander Vex, your squadron has demonstrated capabilities that transcend normal human potential. The question now becomes what the Imperium should do with such capabilities. The implications of what we had demonstrated extended far beyond validation of our divine encounter. If our squadron possessed combat effectiveness that exceeded normal parameters through divine blessing, it suggested possibilities for expanding such enhancement to other Imperial forces through appropriate faith and dedication. Inquisitor, what are the next phases of this investigation? I asked, uncertain whether our demonstrated capabilities would result in expanded responsibility or closer scrutiny. The Ordo Hereticus will prepare recommendations for the highest levels of Imperial authority, Vex replied, his voice carrying the weight of someone dealing with classification levels that exceeded his normal authorization. Your testimony and demonstrated capabilities represent evidence that will reshape Imperial understanding of divine intervention and its practical applications. The investigation was entering phases that would involve authorities I had never imagined interacting with. High Lords of Terror, senior Adeptus Mechanicus personnel, possibly even the Emperor's own Adeptus Custodes. Our reconnaissance mission had uncovered evidence that would challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of Imperial authority and divine protection. Squadron Leader Thorn, Vex continued, addressing our commanding officer with new respect that reflected acknowledgement of our enhanced status. Your unit will be transferred to special assignment pending completion of this investigation. The Emperor protects, and if your testimony proves accurate, he protects in ways that offer new hope for humanity's ultimate victory against the forces of chaos. As I reflected on the magnitude of what our squadron had accomplished and demonstrated, I realized that our encounter with divine manifestation was just the beginning of changes that would affect the entire galaxy. The God Emperor's direct intervention represented possibilities that could reshape the fundamental nature of humanity's struggle against its enemies. Whether the Imperium was prepared to accept and act upon such possibilities remained to be determined. but our squadron had provided undeniable proof that divine protection was not merely symbolic comfort for the faithful, but actual power that could manifest when humanity's need was greatest. The Emperor walked among the stars, and we had been chosen to witness that truth and carry it to a galaxy that desperately needed hope for ultimate victory. Chapter 6. Imperial Summons. The summons to Terra arrived aboard a vessel whose black hull bore only the personal seal of the Emperor himself. No chapter markings, no fleet designations, no indication of its origin beyond the authority that transcended all earthly power. The Adeptus Custodes who delivered the message spoke with voices that carried 10,000 years of absolute loyalty to the Master of Mankind, their golden armor radiating sanctity that made the air itself feel blessed. Wing Commander Cassiel Vex, announced Sentinel Guard Constantine Valdor himself, his presence filling the strike cruiser's briefing chamber with authority that made every person present feel simultaneously honored and terrified. You and your squadron are hereby summoned to provide direct testimony before the Council of Terra regarding phenomena that challenge fundamental assumptions about divine intervention and Imperial doctrine. I felt my pulse quicken as the implications of what was occurring became clear. The Council of Terra was the highest governmental authority in the Imperium, consisting of the High Lords who administered the galaxy-spanning civilization in the Emperor's name. To be summoned before such an assembly indicated that our testimony would influence decisions affecting trillions of human souls across thousands of worlds. Lord Valdor, Squadron Leader Thorn replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what was occurring. The 47th Squadron is honored to serve the Emperor's will in any capacity required. Our testimony regarding divine manifestation is available for whatever analysis the Council deems necessary. The Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes studied our assembled squadron with eyes that had witnessed the Emperor's glory during the Great Crusade itself, evaluating our character and loyalty with perception that exceeded normal human judgment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone delivering information that was classified at the highest levels of Imperial security. Your encounter with divine manifestation has been confirmed through multiple independent sources, Valdor announced, his words carrying implications that staggered me. Astropaths across 17 sectors reported simultaneous visions of golden light walking among the stars. Space Marine librarians detected psychic disturbances consistent with the Emperor's direct presence. Even the Golden Throne itself registered energy fluctuations corresponding to the time and location of your reported encounter. The scope of confirmation that Valdor was describing went far beyond anything I had imagined possible. If our encounter had indeed generated detectable effects across multiple sectors and even influenced the Golden Throne itself, it represented intervention on a scale that had not occurred since the Emperor's ascension 10,000 years ago. More significantly, Valdor continued, similar manifestations have been reported from across the galaxy. The Emperor is not merely active, he is conducting operations that span multiple sectors simultaneously. Your squadron witnessed one manifestation of a campaign that encompasses the entire galaxy. The implications were staggering. If the Emperor was indeed conducting galaxy-wide operations, it suggested capabilities and objectives that exceeded anything described in Imperial theological doctrine. The idea that he remained capable of simultaneous manifestation across multiple sectors challenged fundamental assumptions about his current state and limitations. Inquisitor Vex stepped forward, his expression reflecting someone whose investigation had uncovered evidence far beyond his original expectations. Lord Valdor, what analysis has been conducted regarding the Emperor's apparent objectives in these manifestations? The manifestations consistently occur in regions where chaos influence has been growing beyond sustainable levels, Valdor replied, his voice carrying knowledge that came from direct consultation with the highest authorities in the Imperium. In every case, divine intervention has resulted in the complete elimination of chaos corruption and the establishment of zones of perfect stability that will protect Imperial interests for generations. The pattern that Valdor was describing suggested strategic thinking that encompassed the entire galaxy's struggle against chaos forces. Rather than random interventions or responses to immediate threats, The Emperor appeared to be conducting a coordinated campaign designed to permanently reduce chaos influence across human space. The theological implications require complete re-evaluation of Imperial doctrine, observed Tec Dominus Helios, his mechanical consciousness processing data that challenged established understanding of the relationship between the God Emperor and the material universe. If the Emperor retains capability for direct intervention on such a scale, current Imperial strategy may be fundamentally inadequate for achieving ultimate victory. The strategic implications that Helios was identifying went to the heart of Imperial military and political doctrine. For 10,000 years, Imperial strategy had been based on the assumption that the Emperor was fully committed to maintaining the Astronomicon and preventing chaos breakthrough at Terra. If he retained capability for galaxy-wide intervention, it suggested possibilities for more aggressive approaches to eliminating chaos influence permanently. "Wing Commander Vex," Lord Valdor addressed me directly, his attention carrying the weight of authority that had guided the Imperium since its founding. "Your testimony will be critical in convincing skeptical authorities that immediate action is required to support divine intervention. The Council of Terra must understand that the Emperor's manifestations represent opportunities that will not be repeated if humanity fails to respond appropriately." The responsibility being placed upon my shoulders exceeded anything I had imagined when I first joined the Imperial Navy. I was being asked to convince the highest authorities in the galaxy that fundamental changes in Imperial strategy were required based on my personal witness of divine intervention. "Lord Valdor, what specific action does the Emperor require from Imperial authorities?" I asked, hoping to understand the practical implications of what we had witnessed. "Comprehensive mobilization of Imperial resources to support divine operations," Valdor replied without hesitation. "Fleet movements to establish supply lines in regions where manifestations occur. Astra Militarum deployment to secure areas cleared of chaos influence. Adeptus Mechanicus analysis to understand and replicate the technological enhancement that results from divine blessing." The scope of mobilization that Valdor was describing would represent the largest coordinated Imperial operation since the Great Crusade itself. Entire sectors would need to be reorganized to support operations whose objectives and methods transcended normal military planning. "The political resistance will be significant," observed Inquisitor Vex, his experience with Imperial bureaucracy providing insight into the challenges of implementing such sweeping changes. "Many authorities will argue that reallocating resources from established defensive positions represents unacceptable risk, which is why your testimony is critical," Valdor replied, his gaze focusing on our entire squadron with intensity that made each pilot feel personally responsible for the outcome. "You must convince skeptical authorities that divine intervention offers opportunities for ultimate victory that justify extraordinary risk and resource commitment. The political battle that we were being asked to fight would be as challenging as any military campaign. Convincing entrenched authorities to abandon defensive strategies that had sustained the Imperium for millennia would require evidence and arguments that transcended normal categories of strategic analysis. The journey to Terra will require 3 months, Valdor announced, signaling that our immediate departure was required. You will use that time to prepare testimony that encompasses not just your direct experiences, but their implications for Imperial strategy and theology. The fate of humanity's ultimate victory against chaos may depend on your ability to convince the Council of Terra that immediate action is required. As our squadron prepared for the journey that would take us to the heart of the Imperium itself, I reflected on the magnitude of what we had witnessed and the responsibility that came with bearing testimony to impossible events. The God Emperor's direct intervention represented possibilities that could reshape the fundamental nature of humanity's struggle against its enemies. Whether the highest authorities in the galaxy would be willing to risk everything on the testimony of 43 pilots remained to be determined. But I was certain that our encounter with divine manifestation was just the beginning of changes that would echo across eternity. The Emperor protected not through distant observation, but through direct intervention that occurred when humanity's need was greatest. Our squadron had been chosen to witness that truth and carry it to those who possessed the authority to act upon it. The future of the galaxy itself might depend on whether the Council of Terra would accept what we had seen and commit the resources necessary to support divine operations that could finally achieve the ultimate victory that humanity had sought for 10,000 years. As the golden ship that would carry us to Terra prepared for departure, I felt the weight of destiny pressing against my consciousness. Whatever occurred during our testimony before the Council of Terra would determine whether humanity would seize the opportunity for ultimate victory or continue the grinding defensive warfare that had characterized the past 10 millennia. The Emperor walked among the stars, and we were about to discover whether his Imperium was prepared to follow where he led. Chapter 7. The Council of Terra. The Council. Chamber of Terra was a space that had witnessed the most momentous decisions in human history, where the fate of trillions of souls had been debated and determined by authorities whose word carried the weight of divine mandate. As I stood before the assembled High Lords of Terra, I felt the overwhelming presence of 10,000 years of accumulated power and responsibility pressing against my consciousness like a physical force. Lord Commander Robert Guilliman occupied the position of supreme authority. His superhuman intellect focused on evaluating testimony that would reshape fundamental assumptions about Imperial strategy and divine intervention. Around the vast circular table sat representatives of every major organization within the Imperium: Adeptus Mechanicus, Adeptus Ministorum, Astra Militarum, Imperial Navy, and others whose influence extended across entire sectors of the galaxy. Wing Commander Vex, Guilliman's voice carried the authority of someone who had stood beside the Emperor during the Great Crusade itself. Your testimony describes events that challenge everything we understand about the Emperor's current capabilities and his role in protecting humanity. The Council requires detailed explanation of what you witnessed and its implications for Imperial doctrine. I took a deep breath, aware that the next words I spoke would influence decisions affecting the entire galaxy. Lord Commander, my squadron witnessed the God Emperor himself walking through the void of space, actively imposing order on regions corrupted by chaos influence. His presence eliminated warp disturbances across an entire sector while enhancing our equipment beyond technological explanation. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft whirring of servo skulls, recording every word for analysis by the most sophisticated cogitators in Imperial service. These were individuals who had devoted their lives to understanding and implementing the Emperor's will, yet what I was describing challenged their fundamental assumptions about divine limitation and intervention. Fabricator General Karl, Guilliman addressed the senior representative of the Adeptus Mechanicus. What analysis has been conducted regarding the technological enhancement described in these reports? The ancient tech priest activated holographic displays that showed detailed analyses of our squadron's aircraft, their mechanical forms enhanced by millennia of sacred augmentation. Lord Commander, the machine spirit enhancement documented in the 47th Squadron exceeds known parameters for technological development. The improvements appear to result from direct interface with consciousness entities possessing knowledge beyond current Imperial understanding. Call manipulated the displays to show comparative performance data that demonstrated the magnitude of enhancement we had experienced. Most significantly, the machine spirits demonstrate coordinated behavior that suggests exposure to a unifying intelligence capable of simultaneous interface with multiple artificial consciousness entities. Such coordination typically requires centuries of careful programming, but was achieved instantaneously. The technological implications that Karl was describing supported our claims while raising questions about the practical applications of divine enhancement. If the Emperor could indeed improve Imperial technology through direct blessing, it suggested possibilities for upgrading entire fleets and armies to levels that would provide decisive advantage against chaos forces. Lord Guilliman, interjected Cardinal Buras of the Adeptus Ministorum, his ancient voice carrying the weight of theological expertise accumulated over centuries of studying Imperial doctrine. The theological implications of confirmed divine intervention require fundamental re-evaluation of our understanding of the Emperor's current state and capabilities. The Cardinal activated additional displays that showed doctrinal analyses conducted by the most senior theologians in Imperial service. If the Emperor retains capability for direct material intervention, it suggests that current Imperial strategy may be inadequate for achieving the ultimate victory that represents his divine will. The theological debate that followed encompassed questions that had been argued by Imperial scholars for millennia. The nature of the Emperor's consciousness, his relationship to the material universe, and the extent of his divine capabilities were subjects that touched upon the most fundamental aspects of Imperial faith and governance. The strategic implications are equally significant, observed Lord Admiral Spire of the Imperial Navy, his weathered features reflecting decades of experience commanding fleets in humanity's most dangerous conflicts. If divine intervention is actively creating zones of stability in regions previously dominated by chaos forces, we should be positioning Imperial assets to exploit these opportunities. Spire activated tactical displays that showed potential fleet deployment patterns designed to support divine operations across multiple sectors. The Emperor's manifestations are providing strategic opportunities that could enable decisive strikes against chaos strongholds that have been considered impregnable for millennia. The military analysis that Spire was presenting encompassed possibilities that went far beyond conventional Imperial strategy. Rather than maintaining defensive positions and responding to chaos threats as they emerged, Imperial forces could potentially conduct offensive operations in regions blessed by divine intervention. The resource requirements would be enormous, observed Lord General Militant Tharn of the Astra Militarum, his expression reflecting the practical concerns of someone responsible for deploying millions of soldiers across thousands of worlds. Supporting operations of this magnitude would require reallocation of forces currently committed to defending established Imperial territory. The logistical challenges that Tharn was identifying represented the primary obstacle to implementing the kind of comprehensive mobilization that divine intervention seemed to require. Moving entire armies and fleets to support operations in previously inaccessible regions would leave established positions vulnerable to conventional chaos attacks. The alternative, I interjected, drawing upon the enhanced understanding that had resulted from divine contact, is to continue defensive strategies that gradually lose ground to chaos forces while ignoring opportunities for ultimate victory that the Emperor himself is providing. My words carried conviction that surprised even myself, but they reflected knowledge that transcended normal tactical training. The divine contact had provided understanding of the Emperor's strategic vision that encompassed possibilities for complete victory rather than mere survival. Wing Commander Vex speaks with authority that suggests direct divine inspiration, observed Captain General Valdor, his presence carrying the weight of someone who had served the Emperor since before the founding of the Imperium. Her enhanced understanding may provide insight into divine objectives that exceed normal human comprehension. The Custodes Captain General's endorsement carried enormous weight within the Imperial hierarchy, representing assessment by someone whose loyalty and judgment had been tested over millennia of faithful service. If Valdor believed that divine intervention was providing strategic opportunities, few would dare to oppose such evaluation. Lord Commander, I continued, gathering courage to present arguments that would challenge 10,000 years of established doctrine. The Emperor's manifestations represent culmination of strategic planning that began with the Great Crusade itself. The zones of stability he is creating will serve as staging areas for operations designed to eliminate chaos influence permanently. The scope of strategic planning that I was describing encompassed timescales and objectives that exceeded normal human comprehension. Yet the enhanced understanding provided by divine contact enabled perception of patterns and purposes that spanned millennia of apparent defensive warfare. The Council must decide whether the Imperium will seize this opportunity for ultimate victory or continue strategies that accept eternal warfare as humanity's fate, I concluded, my voice carrying the weight of someone delivering divine mandate to earthly authorities. Lord Commander Gilliman was quiet for a long moment, his superhuman intellect processing implications that would reshape the fundamental nature of Imperial civilization. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone making decisions that would echo across eternity. The testimony presented by Wing Commander Vex and her squadron represents evidence that cannot be dismissed, Gilliman announced, his words carrying finality that ended debate among the assembled authorities. Divine intervention is providing opportunities that justify extraordinary risk and resource commitment. The Primarch activated displays that showed preliminary plans for the most ambitious military operation in Imperial history. The Council of Terror hereby authorizes Operation Divine Mandate, comprehensive mobilization of Imperial resources to support the Emperor's direct intervention against chaos forces across the galaxy. The scope of what Guilliman was authorizing staggered me. Entire sector fleets would be redeployed, millions of Astra Militarum soldiers would be repositioned, and the productive capacity of hundreds of Forge worlds would be dedicated to supporting operations whose ultimate objectives transcended normal strategic planning. Wing Commander Vex, Guilliman addressed me directly, his attention carrying the weight of authority that had guided the Imperium since its founding. Your squadron will serve as liaison between Imperial forces and divine manifestations. Your enhanced understanding of the Emperor's objectives will be critical for coordinating support operations. The responsibility being placed upon our squadron exceeded anything I had imagined when we first encountered divine manifestation. We were being tasked with serving as intermediaries between earthly military forces and divine intervention that operated according to principles beyond normal comprehension. The Emperor protects, Cardinal Burrus observed, his voice carrying the weight of theological certainty that had sustained Imperial faith for millennia. And if Wing Commander Vex's testimony proves accurate, he protects through direct intervention that offers hope for ultimate victory. As the council session concluded and the various authorities began planning for implementation of Operation Divine Mandate, I reflected on the magnitude of what our testimony had accomplished. The highest authorities in the galaxy had committed to the most ambitious campaign in human history, based on our witness of divine intervention. Whether humanity was prepared for the changes that such commitment would require remained to be determined, but the decision had been made to follow where the Emperor led, regardless of the risks involved. The age of defensive warfare was ending, replaced by offensive operations designed to achieve the ultimate victory that had been humanity's dream since the founding of the Imperium. The God Emperor walked among the stars, and now his Imperium would follow, committed to a campaign that would either free humanity from the shadow of chaos forever or destroy it in the attempt. There were no longer any alternatives to total victory or total defeat. As I prepared to return to my squadron and begin the most important mission of our lives, I felt the weight of destiny pressing against my consciousness. We had witnessed the impossible made manifest, and now we would help make it reality across the entire galaxy. The Emperor's vision would finally be fulfilled, or humanity would die in the glorious attempt.